The Quran is not a Muslim book. Who the Quran is for, and its role in the future of the world. This video is a multimedia adaptation of a document prepared for researchers asking about the Quran, who it is for, what is its function, and what is its relationship with other religions. The explanation is provided in question and answer style, divided into 4 parts. Part 1. The function of a religious scripture from God and why He sent many to the human race. Part 2. Why the Quran is not a Muslim book. Part 3. The Quran's role in the future of humankind and America's participation in this process. Part 4. How people of all religions can use the Quran's information to achieve happiness in this life, followed by success in the hereafter, without changing their religious identity. The Quran is not a Muslim book. Preface. Who is the Quran for? Is it only for Muslims, or can people of other religions read and follow its message? A common belief around the world is that the Quran is a religious scripture meant only for those who are known as Muslims. That is why it is often referred to as a Muslim book, or the Book of the Muslims. It is quite natural to have this belief because most religions have a scripture and a defined group of followers associated with it. For example, the Bible is known as the religious book of the Christians, and the Vedas are scriptures associated with the Hindus. While the Quran is associated with Muslims, it is actually a scripture from God for the whole world. Jews, Christians, Hindus, Buddhists, Zoroastrians, and everyone from all religions and faiths are equal inheritors and audience of the Quran's message. It is their scripture as much as the Muslims, and can be followed in any language. Assumptions for the purpose of explanation. To make it easier to explain why the Quran is for all people, the following 2 assumptions have been made. 1. You believe in God and His eternal kingdom of heaven. 2. You know that the primary role of all humans is to develop their souls to make it to heaven after they die. If they succeed, they will live blissfully with God in heaven forever. But if they fail, they will go to hell and live miserably with Satan in it forever. If you did not know or believe any of this earlier, a later section will help you find out exactly why you and everything was created, proof of God's existence, who Satan and the angels are, along with some other information that is critically important to your soul, whichever religion you follow. The Quran is not a Muslim book. Part 1. The function of a religious scripture from God and why He sent many to the human race. What is the function of a religious scripture from God? The primary role of all humans is to develop their souls to make it to heaven after they die. To do this, they must worship God alone and lead a righteous life. However, the hard reality is that most people will not make it to heaven. They will fail in their responsibility to make it to heaven because they will not worship God alone and will not lead a righteous life that pleases Him. The reason for this is the ego. The ego is inspired by Satan, man's most ardent enemy, who wants all humans to fail and not go to heaven. He is constantly trying to mislead them by playing with their ego to prevent them from realizing and doing what they must do to succeed. So to ensure that they are protected from being misled by Satan and instead do the things that will develop their souls to take them to heaven, God has decreed for all humans a set of instructions they must follow. These instructions are what constitute a religion from God, while a scripture is the source that contains those instructions. Everything humans must do on earth to lead a happy life and prepare their souls for the hereafter is detailed in God's scriptures. God has also placed a natural instinct about him in every human being and given them complete freedom to choose their own spiritual path. But without God's guidance, it is very easy for Satan to mislead people without their realizing it. Therefore, while everyone is free to choose their spiritual pursuit, the safest and surest way to achieve happiness in this life, followed by success in the hereafter, is to follow God's guidance from His Scriptures. It is very important for all humans to understand this, because the good or bad consequences of their works in this life are irreversible in the hereafter. Heaven and hell are final, eternal destinations of all human souls after their life on earth. There is no rebirth as a human, or any other creature after death in this world, and absolutely no more chances to try again if they fail. To face God's awesome presence in the hereafter, the soul has to be developed by doing specific things that please God, not what people think should please God. Monotheism and the system of submission to God alone. All scriptures from God are based on the theme of monotheism, which is belief in only one God, and contain a complete system of submission to Him alone. Submission is the religion whereby we recognize God's absolute authority and reach an unshakable conviction that God alone possesses all power. No other entity possesses any power that is independent of Him. The natural result of such a realization is to devote our lives and our worship absolutely to God alone. This is the first commandment in all the Scriptures, including the Old Testament, the New Testament, and God's final testament, the Quran. Quoting examples from other Scriptures, we have, "Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God is one God. Therefore you shall adore the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind, and with all your strength." Deuteronomy 6:4-5. Mark 12:29-30. Quran 3:18. Let us meditate on God, His glorious attributes, who is the basis of everything in this universe as its creator, who is fit to be worshipped as omnipresent, omnipotent, omniscient, and self-existent conscious being, who removes all ignorance and impurities from the mind, and purifies and sharpens our intellect. Gayatri Mantra, Yajur Veda. But why are there many scriptures from God? How are they different from each other? God's instructions have been delivered to us by His specially appointed messengers called prophets, such as Noah, Abraham, Ismail, Isaac, Jacob, David, Moses, John, Jesus, and Muhammad, to name a few. Since the reason for creation and primary role of all humans is the same, the essence of all scriptures from God is also the same. However, as per God's will and knowledge, different communities in different eras have needed different kinds of tests and conditions to fulfill in order to redeem themselves to God. The scripture they received would have all the information required for that. But other than certain laws, rites, practices, examples, and other information that were local and relevant to the community that received a scripture, the principles of monotheism and how to lead a righteous life are common to all scriptures from God. For example, God does not prohibit idolatry, adultery, gambling, and stealing in one scripture, but allow them in another. Therefore, the only differences between God's scriptures are in the laws and information that was meant specifically for the community that received their scripture. As the human population increased and progressed, God sent additional scriptures in accordance with His knowledge of what each community of people needed at that time to succeed. For some, they would be receiving a scripture for the first time. For others, it would be an update of a scripture sent earlier. This update could contain new, revoked, or modified instructions, a reiteration of practices to be continued, or a restoration of some information that became lost or corrupted over time. For example, in Matthew 5:17 of the New Testament, we see Prophet Jesus saying, "Do not think that I have come to abolish the law or the prophets. I have not come to abolish them, but to fulfill them." The important thing to know about God's process of sending scriptures in succession is that every community is required to follow the scripture when it comes to them, even if it means no longer following what they were following up till then. An example of this process is software updates, which must be installed when they are released because they are designed to meet the needs of the day. At some point, older versions will no longer be relevant or valid. There is a general acknowledgement that God's scriptures have been lost or corrupted over time. So if people want to follow God's exact system of submission to Him, how can they? An unfortunate fact about the human race is that whenever God has sent them His guidance, they have almost always ended up disregarding it, leading to loss or corruption of the Scripture. It is an acknowledged fact that several passages across God's Scriptures are missing or have been injected with alterations never decreed by God. That is one of the reasons why there are so many sects and ideologies across religions, with everyone believing that what they have is the right information to follow. However, some missing information or few inaccuracies isn't a reason not to follow God's guidance. For those who really wish to be guided by God, He will guide them in the right path and make them recognize the truth that very much exists in His scriptures, despite the distortions afflicting them. The problem is that people do not want to follow God's guidance in the first place. What they really seem to want to follow is their own opinion or what they find convenient to follow from whatever they blindly inherited from their parents. All scriptures from God guarantee dignity, happiness, and success for those who uphold His guidance. The great prize, of course, is an unimaginable joyous existence in the hereafter forever. On the other hand, those who disregard God's guidance will experience chaos, animosity, and misery in their lives individually and collectively. This is evident from the unhappy state of the world today across all religions and societies. To know how to follow God's exact and unaltered message to the world is covered in Part 2, titled, Why the Quran is Not a Muslim Book. End of Part 1. Get all 4 parts of The Quran is Not a Muslim Book at masjidtucson.org in the Quran section. This video is the property of Masjid Tucson. Copyright 2017. All rights reserved. Website masjidtucson.org. Email info@masjidtucson.org.